the lack of energy is something that you talked about at certain points of the season, and y'all eventually climbed out of that. You're obviously not playing, but what, as coach, is something that you can do to instill the energy in your guys?
Bed check, see what time they go to sleep. I'm just joking. No, I think we've talked about it. You can ask them. We've talked about this slow start and the energy. But we're also trying, that's last year's team was different.
The NBA schedule is demanding. 82 games, constant travel, limited recovery time. It takes a toll on every team. These challenges are real, and LeBron isn't wrong to acknowledge them. However, the issue for many fans wasn't the explanation itself, but the familiarity of it. Similar comments have surfaced before, and over time, that pattern has drawn attention. Social media reacted quickly. Some fans defended LeBron, arguing that he was simply being honest about the realities of professional basketball. Others felt frustrated, questioning when responsibility would shift more directly toward on-court execution. The reaction wasn't just about one comment. It reflected a growing perception built over several seasons. What made this moment different was the response from Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd is not known for chasing headlines. A Hall of Famer, NBA champion, and longtime leader both as a player and a coach, his words carry credibility. During a press conference in early January 2025, Kidd was asked about leadership in today's NBA.
I just asked you a question.
And I'm giving you a answer. Like, you guys, there's all right to write positive stuff. People will read your positive. You don't always have to be negative, right? Like, it's just the world's already negative enough, right? So let's see some positive stuff on some positive people that are doing their job on a nightly basis.
Making it a lot easier to do that this year.
Well, we're only into this year. We can't go back to last year, right?
2025, the focus is shifted to scheduling and fatigue. Each explanation may be valid on its own, but collectively they've shaped a narrative that some fans find concerning. When compared to other all-time greats, the contrast becomes sharper. Players like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant were known for publicly owning losses, often directing criticism inward. Tim Duncan rarely spoke at length, but when he did, the focus was almost always on self-improvement. That approach helped define their leadership identities. This doesn't mean LeBron has never taken responsibility. He has at times, but those moments feel less frequent than the explanations, and perception plays a powerful role in legacy. Leadership is not just about performance, it's about culture. When a team's leader consistently highlights external factors, it can influence how accountability is distributed internally. Kidd's broader point wasn't about diminishing LeBron's greatness, but about how leadership philosophy shapes long-term impact. In follow-up comments, Kidd made his stance even clearer. He expressed respect for LeBron's career while reinforcing that greatness extends beyond statistics and championships. It's also defined by how adversity is handled and how responsibility is communicated. The reaction was immediate and divided. Some viewed Kidd's comments as unnecessary. Others praised him for articulating what many had been thinking but hadn't said openly. Analysts and former players weighed in, framing the discussion as less about criticism and more about expectations placed on generational talents. At this stage of his career, LeBron James remains historically productive. At 40 years old, he is still competing at an elite level, something virtually unprecedented in NBA history.
What else has happened this year?
Just a lot of injuries.
Yeah.
A lot of injuries. But I just felt, we were going to stay around 11. If not, go backwards, just the way that things were going for us this year. But incredible to get number one. Everyone's excited. The organization, the city, the Mavs fans, and also the head coach. So we're really excited about being number one.
Planning on keeping the pick and taking Cooper Flagg?
Yes, I'm just the coach. So, yes, I would say that we're all concentrating on number one. The draft is deep. And so, But as the name you just brought up, I think we're all focused on.
Have you
Question remains, is Jason Kidd right, or is LeBron simply being transparent about the realities of the NBA? And does it matter if elite performance continues? That's for the audience to decide.
As the conversation grew, it became clear that this wasn't just about one post-game comment or one disappointing loss. It was about how narratives are formed over time, especially when the subject is one of the most scrutinized athletes in sports history. LeBron James has spent over 2 decades in the public eye, and every word he speaks is amplified, dissected, and remembered. That reality cuts both ways. On one hand, LeBron's openness has always been part of his identity. He doesn't hide from questions. He doesn't dodge the media. He explains his thinking, his frustrations, and his perspective in ways many stars never have. That transparency has earned him respect, especially from fans who appreciate honesty over rehearsed cliches. On the other hand, transparency without balance can slowly reshape perception. When explanations consistently emphasize circumstances rather than decisions or execution, the message, intended or not, can feel incomplete. That's where the discomfort comes in, not just for fans, but for former players like Jason Kidd who view leadership through a different lens. Kidd comes from an era where public accountability was often blunt and personal. Mistakes were owned, sometimes harshly, because that accountability was seen as a way to demand more from yourself and from the group. His comments weren't rooted in nostalgia or comparison for comparison's sake. They reflected a belief that leadership is less about protecting context and more about absorbing responsibility. This difference in philosophy highlights a broader generational shift in how athletes communicate. Modern players are more aware of workload management, sports science, and organizational decision-making. They speak openly about fatigue, recovery, and long-term sustainability. Older generations often view those explanations as private matters, things handled internally rather than shared publicly. Neither approach is inherently wrong, but conflict arises when expectations clash. For LeBron, the burden is heavier because of his status. He isn't just another star, he is the face of the league across multiple eras. His words don't just represent him, they shape how younger players interpret accountability. When he talks about schedule fatigue, younger players may feel validated in doing the same. When he deflects pressure outward, it subtly redefines where responsibility lives. That's what Kidd was really addressing. He wasn't questioning LeBron's work ethic or basketball.
We're going to the gym. We're doing this. We're doing that. We're going to go as a team. We go eat. We're going here to do this. He's so very. I mean, obviously, it's easier for the better players to do it, but for my existence, Jordan didn't do it. Kobe didn't do it. A lot of players that quote unquote had that quote unquote killer mentality aren't that type of person to do it. And he doesn't, I wouldn't say.
Question of how he'll be remembered. Greatness is no longer up for debate. Interpretation is. And interpretation is shaped by moments like these. Fans remember post-game interviews. They remember tone. They remember whether leaders stood in front of losses or behind explanations. Over time, those memories become shorthand narratives, fair or not. That's why Kidd's comments landed so hard. They gave language to a feeling some fans had struggled to articulate. It wasn't about LeBron declining. It wasn't about questioning his ability. It was whether the mindset matched the standard historically associated with the game's greatest leaders. Of course, this conversation isn't one-sided. There is a strong counter-argument, and it deserves equal weight. LeBron James has played more minutes, carried more responsibility, and endured more scrutiny than almost anyone in NBA history. Expecting him to shoulder blame indefinitely while ignoring legitimate structural issues could be unrealistic and unfair. Basketball is no longer a star-only league. Roster construction, coaching schemes, front office decisions, and league scheduling all play critical roles. Ignoring those realities in favor of old-school accountability narratives risks oversimplifying a complex sport. LeBron's defenders argue that acknowledging systemic problems doesn't mean avoiding responsibility. It means telling the full story. From this perspective, his comments aren't excuses. They're explanations meant to educate fans about the realities of modern basketball. And there's truth in that. The NBA today is faster, more physical, and more demanding than ever. Recovery matters. Travel matters. Scheduling matters. Pretending those factors don't influence performance doesn't make someone a better leader. It just makes them less honest. So where does that leave us? Somewhere in the middle. Leadership at the highest level requires both honesty and ownership. It requires acknowledging obstacles while still centering responsibility internally.
The challenge is balancing those two without leaning too far in either direction. Jason Kidd believes that balance has tipped too far towards explanation. LeBron believes transparency is part of leadership. Neither position is extreme, but the tension between them reflects a deeper question about how greatness should look in its final chapters. History shows us that legacies are often defined not by peaks, but by endings. Jordan's final years with the Wizards didn't erase his dominance, but they reinforced his competitiveness. Kobe's farewell season, despite limited success, strengthened his legacy because of how he carried himself. Tim Duncan's quiet exit mirrored his understated leadership.
LeBron's ending is still unfolding. He has the opportunity to shape this narrative however he chooses. He can let his play answer critics. He can adjust his messaging. Or he can remain consistent with his current approach, trusting that performance will outweigh perception. Each path carries consequences. If he continues to explain losses externally, critics will grow louder. If he pivots toward more visible ownership, even in difficult circumstances, it could soften that narrative. If he remains silent and lets results speak, the debate may cool, but it won't disappear. Because once a question about leadership is raised, it lingers. Jason Kidd didn't accuse LeBron of being a bad leader. He challenged whether his leadership style aligns with championship standards. That distinction matters. It frames the conversation as a critique, not an attack. And critiques are often invitations. An invitation to reflect, an invitation to evolve, an invitation to redefine what leadership looks like at 40 years old in a league that has changed dramatically since LeBron entered it. The larger takeaway from this moment isn't about picking sides. It's about understanding how greatness is evaluated differently depending on era, philosophy, and expectation. Fans want heroes who dominate and inspire. Former players want leaders who absorb pressure and deflect blame. Modern athletes want honesty and context. LeBron James exists at the intersection of all three. That's why moments like this matter. They remind us that greatness isn't static. It's negotiated in real time through words, actions, and responses to criticism. Kidd's comments didn't diminish LeBron's career, but they added texture to the ongoing story. And stories matter just as much as statistics. As this season continues, every response from LeBron will be viewed through this lens. Every loss, every interview, every moment of frustration will be compared against the standard Kidd articulated. Fair or not, that's the reality of being one of the greatest to ever play the game. So the conversation continues, not because people want LeBron to fail, but because greatness invites scrutiny, and leadership, especially at the highest level, is never finished being evaluated. In the end, this debate isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about what we value most in our icons: accountability or transparency, ownership or explanation, tradition or evolution. LeBron James has defined an era. Jason Kidd has challenged how that era explains itself. And somewhere between those two perspectives lies the truth. The legacy is still being written.